Welcome to Tap to the second part of my conversation with Bob Falconer, where we're going to focus on the shift of our relationship to the mind, because the view of the mind we have now in Western societies is dividable and not something that happens between us, and that is actually making us more psychologically vulnerable. And welcome to you, Bob Faulkner, and thank you for taking this time to do a second part with me.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good. Well, I was just wondering how you've been since we spoke last time a couple of months ago. There's been an eclipse and stuff might have
Yeah,
happened.
I'm doing well. I published another book.
You did publish it. You
Yeah,
mentioned the one with a lot of quotes.
yeah. That's available on Amazon now.
Amazing.
When you're going through hell, keep going. And I'll have another book out early next year that's already at the editors with a different publisher. And I'm working on yet another book
Oh my
while
God.
seeing clients and teaching classes.
Really? I was just going to ask if you dedicated all your time to writing, but
One of my friends said, Bob, you're so lazy.
what did he mean by that?
Well, he was joking
Oh,
with me.
okay, right.
I'm 76. Most people retire and put their feet up.
That is amazing. 76. It's amazing. But do you agree, actually? I just saw this clip of Jane Fonda when she was, I think she's 86 now, but the clip, the video clip was from back then. Uh, she was talking about having like a freer spirit or something, like feeling the body was failing her, but that the spirit was more youthful. Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I feel like that definitely. I'm more filled with joy now than I've been at any time in my life.
Wow, that's amazing. That's good. That's good, and that's why it's so valuable for you to speak with us. I mean, and also I want to say that you have done a lot of you have made a huge contribution already to this about the discussion about the Porous mind model. And if you don't have evidence for it, you can just go to a podcast app and put in Porous mind or something. Just yeah, Porous mind. I think I just put in, and like the first 100 was just you. Either the podcast was about you or you were on. People were talking about it. It was you, one or the other, and that was just yeah. I was like, wow, that is yeah. You've really
I
brought this
didn't know
up.
that. That's astounding.
Yeah, that is really
I
good.
still feel most of the time that the things I espouse are countercultural or unwelcome or considered weird and odd. So to hear that people are actually listening makes me feel good.
Yes, yes, but we are, and especially here now we're here, right? They've tuned into this podcast and they're ready, because maybe you can sense that something is not as we've been told. So what can we start by describing what is normalized in an understanding of a porous mind and in what you call a mind that exists only in many leveled interrelationships with our environment?
Okay. Um, Let me see. Let me start with the standard Western view, and which I think is totally wrong. And it's only been in the West in the past maybe 400 or 500 years that this view has developed. And Tanya Luhrmann calls this the great anthropologist. She calls this the citadel model of mind. And it's the idea that our mind, who we are, is contained in this nice bony little structure. Everything in it is private, it's our property, and it constitutes our identity. Now, that seems very strong, but actually, it's incredibly brittle and therefore really, really fragile. You hear one voice or see one image that's not from your own, and you shatter. You think, oh, my brain's broken. Or you hide it and pretend it didn't happen. So it's basically very, very shallow. Now, there's another woman, Isabel Clarke, in England, who has a completely different background. Luhrmann's an anthropologist. Clarke is a inpatient psychologist who works with psychotic people. And she talked about the billiard ball theory of mind. She says, our culture has developed this attitude that our minds are like billiard balls and nothing else can get in. And if that doesn't hold, it means your brain is broken. And she says, this is what makes psychosis so horrible and devastating for people. This wrong concept of who we are. And neither one of those refers to the other one in any of their footnotes or anything. I don't think they know of each other's work. And this is referred to as consilience. When two different fields who don't know about each other converge to the same idea from different bodies of data, that's really, really, really strong evidence that there's something important going on here. Both of these say there is this rigid model that we hold of who we are that's very, very damaging and makes us very, very vulnerable. There's a lot of other people who have similar ideas. I think I'll go to Dan Siegel, the interpersonal neurobiology guy. He says that this idea is so deeply embedded in our language that we cannot think clearly about it. He says we have to invent new language. And he tried, and he says he's got this word, mui, you know, M with a we after it because it's plural, and we're actually created in the interpersonal relationships. We are not separate in that billiard ball citadel way at all. But he says we can't even think about this. It's so deeply embedded in all our European languages, and that you can, you know, have some thoughts up here about it, but to actually live from this other reality it's a big challenge. Ian McGilchrist he has a statement I love, and it's sort of Gnostic almost. He says, the relationship is prior to the relata. The interrelationship between the things that are related, the relata, actually is prior to, and in a sense causes, the things that are related. And it's all process. There are no things. So this idea that who we are actually like nodes in a field, or William James had this wonderful image that he said our individual personhood is like islands in the sea. Looks very, very separate, but if you go down under the water, it's all one seafloor. So if we start really allowing this different view of mind to seep into us, it fundamentally changes all of psychotherapy and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, it's really a fundamental shift. Now, Dick Schwartz in the IFS world, he has explored in detail and brilliantly what the idea that mind is multiple means in terms of psychotherapy, and it revolutionizes psychotherapy. And I believe what Dick has developed over the past 40 years is by far the most potent and respectful form of psychotherapy. But I think this idea of porosity of mind opens us up to all sorts of other stuff that could be yet another revolution that hasn't even begun yet.
It's beginning, right? Because otherwise, all of you clever, smart people would not be talking about it, just the people that you were quoting. And so the reason why I'm asking what is normalized is because you're also talking about abnormal experiences. So
let me say something about that. This word normal or magical or all that stuff, they're a problem. You know, supernatural. Well, that just means it doesn't fit our current ideological box. That's all it
Mm-hmm.
means.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very sort of prejudicial term.
Yeah.
Say something, oh, that's supernatural.
Mm.
That just means your view of nature isn't big enough to contain that yet. So,
Right. But I guess I'm with you. It's just when something is normalized, it's like we don't even, it's not a thing, right?
yeah, yeah,
So what
yeah.
is it that's normalized? Let's say we had this model of mind that you've now feel is that is actually what's going on. That is actually what should be normalized.
Hmm. What would be different if
Yes.
this was
Yes, what
okay?
would we be able to talk about in different ways?
Okay. Well, not just talk about, we'd be differently on the
Ah,
planet.
uh-huh.
If many people say, like Jonathan Hari, he's an expert on addiction, and he said, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Ah,
This this model of this billiard ball, that's disconnection. And there's so many thoughts
yeah.
running through my head. Uh, I'll just go to Owen Barfield because he keeps coming up. He was, the Inklings at Oxford, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, some of the greatest minds of the mid 20th century. Owen Barfield was one of them, and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis said, well, Barfield's the smartest of us. And he was a philosopher who's very little read because he's not easy. But he talked about there was an original participation when, and they would talk about this in terms of animism, or they had all sorts of sort of arrogant look down your long nose at the savages words. But it was a participation. The anthropologist Levi Bruhl talked about participation mystique, that we actually lived in a world relationally, and that this got destroyed by this Western citadel model of mind. And so Barfield talked about the original participation, the separation, and then he says we need to move on to a final participation. We don't want to go back to that, but we want another turn, so we go up to a whole nother level of being.
How would that be?
I'm just sort of go, hey, look that way, gang. The moon's up there. I don't have final answers.
No.
One of the things I think is interesting that I'm not the first to point out, we couldn't treat the world the way we do if we actually knew we were part of it in a way and not separate. So our ecological crisis in large depends on this. Our, we are in an epidemic of mental illness.
Yeah.
And, the whole concept of depression didn't really exist until after the Reformation. It's,
The whole concept of depression.
yeah, yeah, they
Ah,
started writing about melancholia, they called it. They didn't call it depression
right.
back around 1600, 1550. And a whole bunch of other things started happening then. And this is when a lot of people say this billiard ball theory of mind sunk its roots in. The collective joy and festivals and ecstatic dance pretty much got stomped out. Mirrors became something that almost every household had.
Well, that is depressing.
Autobiography started appearing. So there was this whole, you know, also spiritual presence experiences became devalued. Because if you've got this billiard ball theory of mind, the idea of having a direct personal experience of spirit, that's insanity.
Yeah.
Instead of being a life sustaining, wonderful thing that's your source of meaning. I also think if you have this porous model of mind or interrelated model of mind or whatever you want to call it, you have a sense of meaning. And the failure of meaning is absolutely poisonous. Viktor Frankl made this really clear. People who lost the sense of meaning in Auschwitz died. When someone lost their ability to make a meaning out of their lives, they died in a day or two. And Frankl said the inmates could sense it when another inmate had lost this. And they always died in a couple of days. So meaning, spiritual connection are not some icing you put on the cake when everything else is happy and wonderful. They're what keeps you alive.
It's what keeps us alive. Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
And also you have in the chapter of your book on this, well, it's, I think all of it is on this, but there's a particular chapter on the Porous model of mind where you also talk about the implicational mind, where you have the left and the right hemisphere. You have different parts of the brain, and one is rational and logic, and this is how we can account for what exactly happened, and then the other part is how to make meaning of it.
I would phrase that a little differently.
Yes, please do. Please do.
I think it's a matter of how we pay attention.
Yeah.
And how we pay attention, again, McGilchrist is wonderful on this. He is the great expert on the hemispheric issues of mind. How we pay attention actually determines the world we live in. And we could talk about predictive coding and predictive processing and how what we choose to pay attention to literally creates the world we live in. But the right hemisphere, the more meaning-making one, is a more global kind of attention. It's very interested in surprise and the new, and it wants to make connections and, fit everything together. The left hemisphere is a very narrow and focused kind of attention that wants to grab stuff. And if the example he gives is a bird feeding. You need the left hemisphere to focus down on the gravel to pick the seed out of the gravel. It's not that you want to get rid of this. You really need that if you want to eat, right? But you also need the right hemisphere to scan the whole world around you to look for danger, potential mates, all the big picture stuff. And McGilchrist makes the point that the left hemisphere, this narrow, focused, material attention, should be the servant of the right hemisphere. Yeah. But he suggests that it's usurped its place, that it's become hyper-dominant, and that this creates meaninglessness.
Yes.
And he also suggests that there are only a few times in history when the balance was really good. He suggests the Renaissance in Italy and the Golden Age in Greece, Periclean Athens, but
so it is per definition difficult to find the balance for us humans in those. I mean, I was actually listening to some of Tanya Luhrmann's because you mention her a lot. So I was curious to hear, and it was very exciting for me because I'm from a religious background and I've gone out of that, and that is what she's been studying. This thing that I heard is where she was studying Christian churches and how they would have personal relationship with God. And she said she had said something about that. She also found that people had wished they had more faith, that it was also a difficult thing to keep believing. And then and she said that would be similar to other kind of spirituality where you have to adapt, you have to remember that something is the way that you want to believe that it is. Can you follow me? And for me, it's just, this is exactly the thing also now with where I want to believe that there's more to life. And I do have a mind that can question that, because if it's not shown, if there's no evidence, then it's kind of reasonable to question it, right? And all we can see is the physical. And if it's been a while since I've had any supernatural experience or anything, then I'm kind of like, maybe I'm making it up.
Okay.
So
I
what do?
think there's tons of evidence all around us, overwhelming. We've been trained to completely ignore it.
Ah.
We actually have our heads wedged deeply in some place where the sun doesn't shine and refuse to see things that are right in front of our face almost every day. And the
Say
degree
more.
of
Say
willful
more.
blindness in our culture is astounding. It's just
Mm,
like, oh my
mm,
God.
mm, mm.
You know,
But can you understand why you can?
yeah, yeah,
It's,
totally.
yeah.
Totally. The whole culture is or has been dead set against this and crushing it. Like, suppose a kid has an experience of talking to spirits all the time. In our culture, what parents do is go, oh, that's just your imagination, honey. Don't pay any attention. Don't
Mm,
talk to anybody about that. They'll think you're crazy. And if kids have imaginary friends, oh, that's don't pay any attention. Well, it turns out now that they've studied this, kids with imaginary friends mature emotionally more quickly and they
mm,
have better social relationships. So
mm.
we train this out of kids rigorously, and then people. And another point I want to make,
Yes, please.
just speaking to the same issue from a slightly different angle. I got into this work more through a therapy, healing people who were suffering a lot. So I saw a lot of negative entities or spirits or UBs or whatever you want to call them. But as I take a step back and look at the history of all the different cultures all over mankind, by far the majority of hearing voices inside our head or contact with spirits or whatever, it's been positive. It's been sought after. People go into the jungle and spend years meditating, hoping for that kind of experience. And many people, they have these experiences and they're the most meaningful thing that happened in their whole lives. And it gives them energy and direction for the rest of their life. I'm going to say something nasty. There's a very well-known phenomenon. William James called it conversion experiences because he saw it primarily in a religious framework, but it's not necessarily religious. People can and routinely do have experiences in one day or a couple of days that completely change the path of their lives, often in really, really, really good ways. Now, modern psychology has failed to study these or even look at these. And the nasty part is, I think we don't want to look at them because we can't induce them.
Mm.
You see that, and then you see someone going to a therapist for 10 years, and you go, huh?
Yeah.
It makes the therapist feel bad.
Mm.
So those kinds of things happen. People all over the world have had these experiences. Every era of history we have records of, people have these experiences. People doing psychedelics have these experiences. I don't think this sort of communal sense and porous mind experiences can be stomped out. Domination structures don't like it. People who have that internal connection, that deep connection, they can't be ruled. They're
Mm.
really independent. They can't be sold a bunch of products that are useless, you know? So domination structures don't like it. Very sadly, churches often don't like it,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, unless it's within that paradigm that they're operating under, the framework that they believe in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
The evidence that mind is porous, that we're not billiard balls or citadels, is overwhelming.
Hmm.
And the evidence that people meet conscious persons of some form in their inner world is also overwhelming. It is not a sign of insanity. It is not pathology at all. 80% in long term marriages, 40 years or more, one spouse dies, 80% of the surviving spouses hear the voice of their deceased loved one.
Yeah.
That's not pathology.
Mm.
It's not pathology to hear voices of spirits. It's a very, excuse me, a very normal and often beneficial human experience. And we've made that pathology and something people don't want to talk about. And, oh, talk to your therapist about that. He'll
Okay.
help you make it go away. Geez.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I think okay, just to wrap up the question before, I think when I can see that there's a lot of evidence that the mind is what happens between us. It's from your book. I have that wording. It's really cool. The mind is what happens between us. And I even remember as a child, I realized this early on that I'm one person with some people, I'm another person with other kids, right? And it was so confusing to me at the time. And I think it's kind of the similar idea that you would have this underlying understanding that you had to be a fixed self, right? Rather than the self being a process and being open and absorbing what goes on in the environment, as then that becomes part of me too. So I think the thing that I was questioning before in the question with Tanja Luhrmann might have been more around, yeah, the spiritual side of it. But you say there's also evidence for. You say the evidence is all around. Did you say something like that?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, let me give an
Give me
example.
more.
Okay. This one I think for the most rationally oriented people,
Yeah.
the most cut and dried part of the mind is cognition, like knowing stuff.
Yeah.
So think about somebody landing an airplane at an airport. Now, where is the knowledge? Is it in the pilot's brain? Is it in the instrument panel in the airplane? Is it in the air traffic controller's brain? Is it in his instrument panel? Is it at the remote radar stations, which are tracking all the planes that are trying to land at the airport? It's obviously distributed.
Hmm.
Distributed cognition. There's a whole field in cognitive science called distributed cognition. To effectively intervene in that system and help it become more efficient so planes can land more safely, you need to consider the distributed nature of mind. I mean, it's like, and lives are at stake here. This is not woo-woo at all. This
Mm.
is, saving lives. The same kind of thinking has been applied to the command chains in naval vessels. Where's the intelligence? Where's the mind? Is it
Oh.
in the captain's head? No. Is it in the radar? All these, it's distributed.
Like a group
To
mind.
help yeah, it's distributed mind. It's not a billiard ball gang.
Mm.
Not at all. And I
Yeah.
bring these up because
Yeah.
these are life and death decision processes. It's not woo woo. It's not airy fairy. It's this is really hardcore, hard edge kind of science. And you have to consider it as a system. That one's kind of hard to deny.
It is. It is. The group mind is, like you see that all the way through school and with kids, right? The developing a class mind. So that's how we function. There's a lot of this that is about how we function, but what does it imply about another reality?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think one reason people don't want to accept this is it's very, very frightening. And we've lost any of the guideposts and traditional ways we might have of navigating in that other world. It feels like you're going into this vast soup, and all of a sudden there are all these tidal forces that are much bigger than you that are going to suck you around. So people don't want to go there. They just retreat back up into their small world. I think our inner world, the subjective realm, this porous mind realm, is at least as vast as the external universe.
Mm.
And I actually think it's larger. And we know nothing about it. We know very, very little about our external universe, um, despite what some overly enthusiastic academics think. We're astoundingly ignorant. In the inner world, it's even worse. You know, not even kindergarten. So start if you start exploring and going in there, the farther in you go, the weirder and stranger things get.
Hmm.
You go toward the antipodes of the mind, things open up, they become vast, luminous. You meet intelligent beings who seem to have wisdom much greater than yours. You start opening up to past life experiences, negative spirits, divinities, saints, daimons. There are all these terms you could use for it. Jung went in there when he had that very difficult period after he broke with Freud, and he met, Philemon and these other spirit guides who were very real beings to him. And he said his whole life's work depended on his meeting these beings in his inner world. So you start taking this stuff seriously, and you've opened up a whole nother universe.
You also
And
write up.
I just want to say that
Yeah.
there are safe ways to navigate in this universe.
There are safe ways to navigate in what you can say. What you said is that it's also frightening.
Yeah, there's a wonderful, that there's that old traditional quote, the mystic swims in the same sea that the madman drowns.
Yeah.
Well, somebody said, well, what you need is swimming lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. Good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we should be developing swimming lessons. But instead of that, we're basically training everyone. Oh, that's real scary. Don't go there. Ah, which is the worst thing you could do.
It's interesting astrologically because I'm definitely thinking about the water element, the water archetypes. I'm gonna make it plural, but probably mostly Pisces. And you can definitely see that you can both drown and you can become a real enlightened mystic within that archetype. Another thing you write about in your book is how dreams can be an example of these kind of transliminal experiences. And I know for myself that is something that I go to when I question is there anything more than what I can see, feel and
Hmm.
sense, touch. Then I go to the dreams because I cannot explain it, and I've talked to many people about it. Some I've recorded, some I've interviewed experts on it, and just in private because I've had such an interest in it. Uh, and it's still a mystery. It really is. So
That's a
just
good thing.
yeah,
The sort of I think sort of the Western left brain way of analyzing things, when you understand something, it's dead.
yeah,
It's like a bug pinned to a board.
good.
That's not the kind of understanding I want to have of my dreams.
Uh-huh.
If you take a more right brain attitude, as you get curious, you open up more and more. And instead of getting, you know, down, you get wider and wider. And instead of moving to a final answer and everything's done, you move towards wonder, curiosity, awe, and then you start getting into ecstasy and euphoria and trans life transforming experiences. So I think there's two kinds of knowing at least, and that this other kind of knowing is also discredited in our culture. But it keeps coming back.
Hmm.
It's like grass that keeps growing up through the concrete.
Yeah, because it is part of us, and we can't
Hmm.
live without it, like you said.
No, we can't. And you think about this billiard ball or citadel model of mind, that is alienation. It is isolation. It is meaninglessness. All these things, which all these different writers are saying over the past 100 years have been destroying our culture, I think they all go back and have their roots in this misconception of who we are. And there are clearly ways to cultivate these other kind of experiences. Tanya Luhrmann wrote one of her wonderful books. It's called How God Becomes Real.
Yeah.
She talks about the inner practices that people have to help them navigate this inner world. And there's lots of others. Henri Corbin talked about the imaginal. That's a whole, that's a whole vast field in and of itself. But
But
it is possible to learn.
and when you say that the divided mind is alienating us, do you mean alienating us from ourselves or from a community? What exactly do you mean by that word alienation in this
Both.
context? Yeah, yeah,
when you
yeah,
have when you have when you have this view of yourself as your mind as a billiard ball or a fortress,
yeah.
you are separate from all the other people around you. There are other fortresses, potentially allies, potentially enemies, you don't know. You're separate from all the experience you've cut off. All the what we would call unconscious stuff becomes an enemy that you need to keep out. Yuck. You're also separate from the environment, from nature. It's no longer, the indigenous here, they talk about all my relations when they're talking about the plants and animals and all that stuff around them, all my relations. You've lost all that. So you're separate from all of that. You're just this isolated little fortress with no sense of meaning, nothing bigger than you.
Yeah.
And it's meaningless and miserable. So we drink a lot, we eat too much, we, we consume all sorts of useless stuff, we poison the planet.
Yeah. And we normalize that.
Yeah, yeah. And people who don't do that, we medicate or lock up, give them electroshock.
So when you say that about, so we're not separate, we're connected. What about the jealousy? I've just been wondering when that emotion comes up in me, if I'm jealous. And I'm like,
Mhm.
but can I even be that if the other person is also me? How would you? I'm just curious. What do you think about jealousy?
I don't really know. I don't have a great answer for that. But I think it would become a lot less if you actually could operate from this other paradigm.
Yeah, because jealousy implies that I'm on my own and I'm comparing myself to others.
Yeah. And I don't have a good answer for that one. One thing I will say, just I don't know how it fits, but it keeps coming up. Daniel Siegel made the point that the number one way we regulate our own internal emotional neural states is by our relationships with other people. We don't do it inside our heads. And he said that's most clear with an infant with its mother. If the infant is distressed, it regulates its internal distress by its connection with its mother. And I think Siegel would maintain that this continues to be the primary reality, but we just pretend it isn't.
So Bob, you were just saying, I don't know if this is a fit answer, and then you said, but it keeps coming up. So even just speaking, you have this. There is this porous mind present, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Where something can come in, and you feel like this may be you who thinks that you should say this, but it may also be something else that has a reason for this coming through you. Do you understand it like that?
yeah, yeah, very much. If you start thinking about, well, where do my thoughts come from?
Yeah.
Are they actually mine in any realistic way? Are they my possessions? Or,
Yeah.
and you start trying to watch how the thoughts arise in your head. Just that very simple inquiry will start taking you into this idea of porous mind. Most of the most creative people talked about receiving the creative energies that came into them from somewhere else. They heard voices, saw visions, had dreams, all that kind of stuff.
So you know that for yourself when you're speaking, and you kind of have to sort through, and then you have to decide, decipher
Yeah, yeah.
which one.
Which one of these do I want to
Yeah.
adopt? Which one of these am I going to say aloud?
Yeah. 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 Do you sometimes feel that something is speaking through you? Do you
Oh,
have
definitely.
is there a
When I
certain
work,
felt sense to that?
yeah, when I
Mm?
work with clients, very much my experience is getting myself and my normal daily small self out of the way and letting spirit work through me. And the image I have is sort of becoming a hollow bone.
Okay. Mm.
And the best sessions happen when I can do that. The more deeply I can do that, the better the work that happens in the client while I'm sitting there.
Mm. Yeah. So the more you can be a hollow bone
Yeah,
and let something through.
yeah. There have been progressive dethronements of the ego throughout the history of the West. We thought we were the center of the universe. And at first, like China, the traditional Chinese name for their kingdom was the Middle Kingdom. We're the middle of everything. I think
Ah,
almost every nation has held that belief. And then, well, it's flat, we're the center. Oh,
we're the
uh-oh,
center.
it's round. Uh-oh, we're not the center of the universe, the sun over here. Uh-oh, our solar system. We just keep getting to be a smaller and smaller. And then, oh, gee, even in my own head, I'm made up of parts. I'm not one unified thing, and I'm not the boss in here. Uh-oh, and now, oh my God, it's porous too. It's just progressive dethronements of our pride.
Mm. So for me with dreams, it is really weird. Like you say, in a good sense that I can't explain it. I guess it's just my rational brain that sometimes like, what's going on? Do you want to hear a phenomena that's and you can maybe it's completely normal and people will have had this too, and maybe it's unique. I don't know. I guess it's like this with many of these experiences, right? But for
Mhm.
me, it's like I can get tired. There are different levels of being tired, but some kind of tiredness wants me to sleep. Like during the day, like you have to sleep, and I will resist it. Consequently, because I'm doing something else and I can't go to sleep now, and but then if I'm sitting still, of course you can do an activity, you can go run, and then I can resist it. But if I'm reading, for example, I will resist, and then I start hearing something, words, and that's when I know that I've slipped into a dream. And then I can like come up again a little bit. No, I don't want to. Like press my hands or do something to get back up. And then it takes me down under. And this will continue until I let go.
Mhm.
And then another process starts where I'm in the dream and I realize that I'm in a dream and I want to get out because I know that I have things to do in the material world and I'm not supposed to be sleeping through during the day. It's a very funny process, and I can hear the dreams before
Mhm.
I guess it's a little bit before I'm actually in sleep, like they're calling me. But these are also the dreams
Well,
that I can't remember anything of afterwards because it's during the day and I don't have any intentional work before it.
this might be one of those very well disguised blessings, in that you might be able, instead of resisting and fighting this, you might be able to talk to that voice and say, "Oh, hi, how come you want my attention right now? What do you have to tell me? I'd really like to get to know you." And turn towards it with curiosity and welcome. And if you have this porous model of mind and you believe that you can meet beings in there who are potentially wiser than you are, or at least see things from a different angle, you know, then you're interested in talking with them. I think, the hearing voices movement is, I think, a really, really significant movement. It was started by well, it was mainly people who'd been in mental institutions, who had been locked up for hearing voices.
Okay.
And they were told, these voices are bad, just shut them up. Don't
Mm.
listen.
Mm.
We'll medicate you until those go away.
Mm.
And then they started dialoguing with the voices and interacting with their voices, and they got better. It used to be if, as a therapist, you started encouraging a client to dialogue with the voices they heard, someone who's, quote, psychotic, you could lose your license. you were colluding with the delusions of the insane, and
Right.
this was bad news. But actually, people who do this get better. They have, they can develop at least some kind of neutral relationship with these voices, very often a beneficial relationship, and they can just form a relationship. So I think that's an incredibly important change. And it did not come from the professional therapist, it came from the clients. And then a few professional therapists had enough awareness to actually listen to their clients
Mm.
and follow the client.
Yeah, it's a funny thing about listening to the client, because of course you have the intention of listening, but then if you have a framework where, like you said, they are deluded, they're making this up from a negative place, or how you want to say
Yeah,
it, but like it's not serving them, then of course you don't want to collude with that.
no, you
Mm.
don't. But,
Mm.
if you greet all these voices with hostility and try and medicate them
Yeah.
into oblivion, they're going to have a bad attitude.
Yeah.
This is like
Exactly.
picking a fight.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very hostile attitude.
I wanna, when you talk about this, I wanna ask you about because we have only a few minutes left, and I don't know if I'm gonna get a chance again with you. So I wanna ask you about what paranoia, which is also something that I can suffer from. I've never been medicated for it because because I just have, if they close that down in my brain, then they're gonna close something else down as well. I don't think it can just be taken away, so I have to deal with it. But paranoia, like people, like the feeling of people are looking at me uh, when
Okay.
they are rationally are not.
Okay. Let me talk about, I want to go back to dreams for just a minute
Yes,
because you brought that up. And
love
that was
dreams.
before I got involved in IFS, that was my main focus.
Was it?
Gestalt work with dreams.
I didn't even know
I
that.
encourage you not to try and analyze or understand the dream, but to dialogue with the dream characters. There's some character in there, call it up and say, "Hi, you showed up in my dream. I'd really like to get to know you better. How come you're here? And what do you need? And how can I help you?" A friendly, open, heart-centered dialogue, very much along the lines of Jungian active imagination. And that opens up a fertile ground. And it's again, it's that wide open curiosity that leads to wonder and awe and great learning.
But it's
Oh,
very complex. It's very complex with dreams. Just to stay on that for a little bit,
yeah.
because I last night I had a dream about 1,000 people. I felt there was so many. Like I can't speak to all of them. There was
You could
so
you could
many
ask you
people.
could ask for a spokesperson,
Okay, right. Okay.
and you could talk to the roommate all the thousand are in. There's always some way you can dialogue with a dream.
Talk to the room. The 1,000 are in. Mm.
Yeah, or are they
Mm.
all in an auditorium? Talk to the auditorium.
Uh-huh. Ah, good. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's many, many, many ways, and a
Yeah.
lot of people have worked with dialoguing with dreams. Paranoia.
Yes.
First of all, the sense that you're being stared at.
Yeah.
Rupert Sheldrake has done wonderful work on this, and they're easily replicatable experiments. People can sense when they're being stared at.
You can't, or you can.
Can.
Okay.
You
Yes.
definitely can,
Yeah.
even though this is impossible according to traditional Western science. You can do it. And Sheldrake has shown this
Mm.
very, very clearly. And this is one thing, if you have a porous mind view, it's expectable. A lot of sort of, quote, extrasensory perception is just totally expectable. If you know mind is porous, well, of course people be able to sense that. Anyway, Sheldrake's done that. Paranoia is very often, in my experience, paired with sort of the word has the wrong connotation, but grandiosity.
Mm.
A sense of grandeur, bigness, wonder, almost sacredness gets paired as sort of as a polarization, two sides, with this paranoia, the world's dangerous, people are out to kill me, all that kind of stuff over here. And then each one sort of gets more and more extreme to balance out the other one. You know, it's like if you're in a little canoe and someone starts leaning out one side, you lean out the other to keep the canoe balanced, and
Yeah.
then both of you are leaning out farther and farther and farther, and then both of you are in painful positions and you can't move at all because the canoe will go over. So you don't want like you said, you don't want your paranoia to disappear because the canoe will tip over. You want to find the place where you can observe both the paranoia and whatever for you is the other side of that. You know, very often grandiosity is a hideous word because it's sort of judgmental, but a sense of grandeur, you know,
I mean,
or the goodness of the
grandiosity.
universe. Yeah, the goodness of the universe
Okay.
and paranoia.
Uh-huh.
So you get above both of those so you can relate to both of them and then you help them negotiate. Well, could you both come back in together? You
Mm.
know, you don't have to fight. You don't have to friendly, honest, open relationship with both sides of that issue.
But is that where you say that when you have spiritual experience, when you're prone to have spiritual experiences, then you're also prone to psychosis? Is that the similar idea in what you're
I
explaining
think
here?
so. Well, yeah, I don't like the word psychosis. The, it was only invented as a term in the 1830s. This is not an ancient idea. I mean, it's a relatively recent invention, and if you trace its history, it's had radically different meanings. I think it's again, there are various measures of the porosity of mind. People who we label pejoratively as psychotic have very porous minds, typically.
That's the thing I was thinking about. Yes. Okay. The people we
Yeah.
label as. Can you say it again?
People we label as psychotic
Yeah.
tend to have very porous minds.
That's
And there
it.
are a lot of measures of this. I mean, we can measure the degree of porosity. One was developed in England. It was called the schizotype scale. And this guy, I think his name was Church, developed it. And at first he just wanted to measure psychopathology. But then he realized people who scored high on this scale were also vastly more creative. Then he realized, oh, they have way more spiritual experiences. Oh, they have all sorts of quote extrasensory. It's only extrasensory because our definition of sensory is too
Uh,
small, you
yeah.
know. So, but they have all this other wonderful stuff that goes along with quote psychotic features. And I think one reason why the psychotic features are so negative is because we greet them with great hostility.
You also mentioned the absorption scale
Yeah,
as
yeah,
another
the
way to measure it.
Tellian absorption scale. That's the one that Tanya Luhrmann uses in her studies of this. And it's basically, if you're reading a book, can you become so absorbed in the book that you don't hear sounds going on around you?
Right.
Or you lose sense, all that kind of stuff. There's also the transliminality scale. And I think transliminal is a much better word than unconscious or subconscious. Transliminal just means across a threshold, which is what it is. You go into that porous mind, you're crossing a threshold. In no way is it less than or underneath or anything like that. There's great wisdom in there. That's where I believe most human creativity comes from. So to call it sub or un is like, it makes it almost impossible to think clearly
And you
about,
just
about the nature of our minds.
and you describe in this chapter of your book that the process of ritual, is that what the book is called?
Yeah,
The process of ritual, but where to be initiated, you had to go outside, leave the culture, and go into, well, the
yeah,
spirit room.
yeah. This is Victor Turner's work. And again, transliminal comes from psychotherapy. Victor Turner's an anthropologist working in tribes in Africa. He doesn't call it transliminal, he just calls it liminal. Every ritual, he says, you start with someone in the culture, you have a process to get them out of the culture, cross the limen into the ritual space, which is across the liminal space, he calls it. There you can help people make changes in them that are lasting, lifelong lasting and beneficial. And then you have another process to bring them back down across the limen into the culture. And they're a different person. They die and are reborn. And it's the same idea. He just calls it liminal instead of transliminal. Again, we have that consilience thing, data from two different fields coming to the similar conclusion, which I think is very, very powerful.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot is pointing towards that. I think the listeners and we can find many examples of something like that where you would have to leave culture in order to get something either processed, as you say, changed and transformed.
Yeah.
So
Psychedelic
yeah,
experiences are very
for
much like.
example, yeah,
I'm so glad there's a renaissance, and
yeah.
I hope it goes better this time.
Then back in when
Back in the
the
60s and
60s.
70s, where there was that
Yeah.
huge reaction.
Okay. Yeah. There's many needs now showing up. For example, kids who don't approve of being schooled in the way that we've been doing, and kids that we label with, yeah, well, who may have autism from birth, and so what is all that about? And I think this is that's why it is so relevant to question the way that we've been thinking about the mind in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's really good that kids don't like the way we're being schooled.
Yeah.
I think the way we're schooling them is designed to sort of discipline them and beat them into useful little cogs in a machine. I think that's terrible. I was a teacher a very long time ago, briefly.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's and making little kids sit in neat little rows, all facing forward. It's military indoctrination. Not good.
Not good. No, yeah, I'm definitely with you, and I feel like I'm the most porous mind of all. I feel like I am it. It's very Piscean, and I also feel that it explains a lot of things for me that I'm not even able to articulate. You know, that feeling like, and I can't really put words to it. It just explains stuff. And I think it is really important because another movement out there is something like Jordan Peterson, and now also this woman, I forgot her name, but she's the one with a book called Bad Therapy, if you've heard of her. No, anyway, she's the same conservative opinions about, well, we need to train kids in a certain way. And yeah, so it's like a movement away from what could be interpreted as loose boundaries with kids, but what I think many of us would think is just because it's a more modern approach to children and learning environments.
Well, I think there are many, many things wrong with what we're doing. And I think this, first of all, the idea of multiplicity of mind changes everything. And porous mind is even more radical. And I think everything I've been able to do in 50 years of work is just cracking a door open, little tiny bit. So I don't have any final answers. I don't even pretend to think I have any final answers, but I think the potential is amazing, wonderful, and exciting. So I hope people in listening to this at least get a little sense of, wow, this is really exciting. If this was true, it would mean, and just,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I would hope to leave people with.
that's really good. That was sort of that is my overall question for you, right? What does this mean? And we can keep asking that. Yeah.
Yeah. It means that our minds are much, 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 much bigger than we think they are. And that we have access to all kinds of experiences, and they are normal and healthy within the normal, healthy human range. And they've been outlawed or exiled or banned or made wrong. And that's a big, big, big mistake.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking
Actually,
about with the discipline, right? When you have that thought about disciplining children and disciplining the human nature, then there's something contradictory to this
yeah. Well, I
openness.
think, yeah, discipline is also necessary. I work really hard. I'm very disciplined,
Oh, I'm
but
sure you are.
toward a different goal.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for this, Bob Falconer.
Okay, you're
Very,
very welcome.
very grateful, and I'm looking forward to reading your next books in plural. Yeah. Keep them
Great.
coming.
Do my best.
Okay. Bye, Bob.
Bye bye.
Bye.